Good morning and welcome to Monday Manna. I'm your host, Frank Adams. Our topic today is creating church culture. Every congregation has its own church culture. Brian Walker observed, culture is like the wind. It is invisible, yet its effects can be seen and felt. Eric Eccles lists 5 types of church cultures. He sees an inspiring culture, an accepting culture, a stagnant culture, a discouraging culture, and a toxic culture. I'm certain that this list of Eric's is not exhaustive. I like to speak of church culture as formed by ideas, values, rules, and customs embraced over time. More specifically, I normally say what a church allows, approves, and applauds creates culture and reveals the culture that it currently exists. A church's culture produces a certain feel and an atmosphere about the congregation. I want to make a number of observations today concerning church culture and creating or leading change in a church culture. First of all, I want you to know that leaders lead change. Leaders create culture. They influence culture. They establish culture. Warren Bennis and Bert Nanus, author of the book entitled Leaders, made the observation, above and beyond envisioning capabilities, a leader must be a social architect who understands the organization and shapes the way it works. So leaders lead change, they shape the church's culture. One thing that you have to acknowledge when it comes to church culture and leading change in that culture is that changes create controversy. Lyman Beecher stated, "No great advance has been made in science, politics, or religion without controversies." Leaders, experienced leaders, expect and embrace controversy as inevitable, essential, and even desirable. Some people are thrilled with change, others are threatened by change. One thing that leaders must be conscious of and careful of is that any resistance or controversy surrounding the change that they're wanting to make, that none of the controversy or the resistance is attributable to the manner, the means, or the methods that they themselves use. Leading change requires the expenditure of emotional assets. Leaders must have emotional assets accrued before making change. When you go to make change, you spend the emotional assets that you've acquired in your relationships with people over time. The leader needs emotional capital to effect change. Any loss of confidence in the leader results in the loss of emotional assets that are necessary to effect change. When the leader dissipates or utilizes all of his emotional assets, then they must back off until they can acquire additional assets and then re-engage and move forward in leading change. Leaders always need emotional capital to produce change. Number 3, leading change requires courage. Leadership is not for the faint of heart, especially when it comes to leading change. 3 times God reminded Joshua that leadership requires courage. Joshua 1, 6, 7, and 9. Joshua was also given 3 reasons to be courageous. First of all was God's presence. Verse 5, 9, and 17 of chapter 1. Then God's promises is a source of courage. Verses 3, 5, and 11. And of course, number 3, God's power. 5 and 13 of chapter 1. Joshua was even reminded a 4th time to be courageous by the very people that he was to lead. Joshua 1:18. Number 4, churches must change or close. It's imperative that churches change. According to Thomas Rainer, an expert in church health and revitalization, Rainer states that churches are in a death spiral. They can either embark on a process of change and revitalization, or close their doors for a season and reopen with a new name, a new vision, and some new people. Or a third choice is to just simply do nothing and die. Thousands of churches will unfortunately do just that in the next 12 months. 8,000 churches will close every year in America. That number is predicted to increase to 10 or 12,000 during this COVID pandemic. In my own denomination, approximately 30 churches close every month. Rainer lists 8 signs of churches that will be closing soon. Here are those 8 signs. Number 1, there has been a numerical decline over the last 4 years or more. If so, your church is likely to close. Number 2, the church doesn't look like or represent the community in which it's located. Number 3, the congregation is mostly comprised of senior adults. Number 4, if the church is focused on the past rather than on the future, you're likely to close in the next year or so. Number 5, when members are intensely preference-driven. In other words, what goes on at church is about the members' comfort and preferences. Number 6, when you look at the church budget and that church budget is severely inwardly focused, just taking care of what is there currently, then they're likely to close. Number 7, your church is likely to close if they're sacred cow facilities. Any alterations or renovations to the current facilities are met with strong resistance, just wanting to hold on to the way things have always been. Number 8, if you're in a church that gives fierce resistance to any type of change, then you're likely in a church that is going to close soon. It's imperative churches must change or they will close. Here are a number of changes that churches must make. Number one, we must change from being consumers of ministry to being contributors of ministry. Number two, we must change from being served to serving. Number three, we must move from membership to ministry. We must move from just friendly greeting to a process of assimilation. We must move from immaturity among the members to maturity. The church must move from complacency and inactivity to action. The church must move from entertaining its attendees to equipping the church for ministry. We must move away from clergy ministry to lay ministry, to laymen doing the ministry. There are significant changes that the churches must make, and a resistance or an unwillingness to make those changes will assure that the church's demise will be soon coming. Number 6, thinking and acting outside the box. Scott Ball posted on the Malthus Group website an article, 6 Characteristics of Revitalizing Pastors. One of the 6 characteristics that he gave was that revitalizing pastors are innovative. Here's what Scott said. Successful revitalizing pastors aren't afraid to try new things. In fact, they thrive on it. Many pastors of declining churches aren't afraid of new things, but they are afraid of ruffling feathers. Pastors who want to succeed in revitalization need to be more afraid of failing at the Great Commission than they are of deacon deep pockets, that they will complain and possibly leave the church. It's not only important to have the capacity to think outside the box, but it's critical to have the commitment to actually think outside the box. I think that there are numerous impacts that we as leaders need to purposefully shape the church's culture. I'm of the opinion that we need to shape the church culture into be a serving culture, a sacrificing culture, a generous culture, a culture of excellence. And in our upcoming broadcasts, we'll speak specifically to creating and shaping the culture to manifest those types of attitudes and demeanors and spirit and heart. I'm glad you tuned in today. I want you to know that you're a leader. You have influence. You have impact. You have the potential to shape your culture. God bless you. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week with the second installment of Changing Church Culture.